We are coming to the end of the year now in One Championship, only a couple of big events left to go, so I thought it'd be a good time now to talk about the current title holders in the promotion and kind of either what I want to see for them next or potentially just what I want to see for them in the next year throughout 2024. At the time of recording, we don't have a main event for One Fight Night 17, the final fight night of the year, so and I have no idea what that's going to be, to be honest with you, so difficult to predict that, but we do have a few title fights coming up at One Friday Fights 46, but I will talk about those when we get to them. So we will start at the lowest weight class and move our way up, and yeah, let's get into it. So, of course, we are going to be starting with the Atomweight Submission Grappling World Championship that is held by Danielle Kelly, who won it at One Fight Night 14 with her victory over Jessica Khan. There are 4 Submission Grappling World Champions in this promotion, and my thing that I want to see from them next year is pretty much the same across the board with a few little exceptions here and there. I just want to see them compete in quality matchups consistently, right? One have done a good job of signing some very exciting grapplers, Kelly being one of them. And it's great to see her in this promotion and see her competing, but we need to see her competing against high-level opposition. And in Kelly's defense, I think that it's a little bit more excusable because I've enjoyed seeing her be tested by some people with some different skill sets and stuff, because we haven't seen her compete at a super high level compared to, like, as frequently as some of the other guys that hold titles in this promotion. And seeing her against Jessica Khan was great. I think that was one of the better grappling matchups that One Championship have put together. So credit for that one. I would just like to see her continue that, competing against high-level opposition. And I think that she'll benefit from Khan being active in this division as well. So yeah, that's what I want to see for Danielle Kelly. Moving on to Atomweight Muay Thai, you've got Alicia Helen Rodriguez, who of course made her return this year. She defeated Janet Todd to unify the division and, you know, take her place back as the world champion. And then she went up and fought Smita Sundell for the Strawweight title and came up short. I would just like, activity is going to be a big theme, all right? Because, of course, what do you want from your champions? You want to see them at least twice a year, really. I say at least twice a year, I think, is fair to expect. We have seen Alicia Helen Rodriguez twice this year, so twice again in 2024 would be good. We have a title fight that I will talk about in a minute coming up, and I think that she could reasonably fight the loser of that matchup, because I think that either would be great fights. I suppose we'll just talk about that now, actually, because you've got the Atomweight Kickboxing World Championship held by Janet Todd. And of course, you have an interim belt coming up in that division at One Friday Fights 46. You've got Fetjija taking on Anissa Mexon, which sets either one of those up for a great unification fight with Janet Todd that I'm very excited for. Very excited for that fight between Mexon and Fetjija. And I think, like I said, I think either of those could probably go and fight Alicia Helen Rodriguez for that Atomweight Muay Thai title, because they're both great and very deserving. So I don't think our loss sets either of those people back too far, so I think we could see that. And then finally, rounding out the Atomweight division, you have of course got the Atomweight MMA World Champion Stamp Fairtex. At this point, Stamp can pretty much do what she wants. She's made history by winning that MMA title. I don't really see any interesting options at the moment for her to make a title defense amongst the other atomweight contenders. I would say the only interesting one there is maybe if Itsuki Hirata gets back in the win column. That's a big fight that we haven't seen yet, but obviously she lost to Hamsio Hee, who then lost to Stamp, so it's hard to make that currently. Like I said, I think Stamp can do what she wants. I think if she wants to go back into striking, see if she can pick up another world championship in striking so that she can hold that and the MMA title at the same time, I think she should be able to do that. And if she wants to go up a weight class to challenge to try and become a 2-weight world champion, I think she can do that too. So I'm not worried about whatever is next for Stamp, but yeah, I think that probably something a bit more special than a title defense will probably be next, if we're being honest. But I would like to see her return to striking at some point, which we did see this year. But yeah, I'd like to see her do that next year as well. Moving up now to strawweight. We'll start with the strawweight MMA world champions, Yong Xingnan. Dominant champion, not a lot of challengers for her. Again, I spoke about Stamp maybe going up a weight class. I think that makes a lot of sense, a champion versus champion fight. I think that will probably be the last thing out there for Xiong to compete in. I know that she's defended that belt, obviously, against Angela Lee in the past, moving up, so... But, you know, a little bit of fresh blood with it being Stamp instead and a different challenge. She had that mixed rules fight, which didn't really catch fire. So difficult to predict what's next for her. But I think that a fight with Stamp could definitely be on the cards for next year at some point. Strawweight Muay Thai, you've got Smila Sundell. Activity, another one straight off the bat. We did see her twice this year, but one of them was a Friday fights contest and not a title defense. So... the obvious pick is that rematch with Jackie Buntan that was, of course, supposed to happen at One Fight Night 14 until Buntan withdrew and Alicia Helen Rodriguez stepped into her place. Jackie Buntan is the clear number one contender. Their first fight for the title was great, so run that one back. I'm excited to see that one next year. So that makes sense all by itself. Moving over to the men's side of the strawweight divisions, you've got strawweight MMA world champion Jared Brooks, who of course cleared out a lot of the top contenders at strawweight on his way to becoming the world champion. I think that the obvious pick next would be a rematch with the former champion Joshua Pasio, who of course went away after losing to Brooks and picked up a win over Mansour Malachiev. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Potentially eyes on Lito Adiwang if he picks up another win. That would be, you know, he's produced back-to-back wins since returning from injury. So I think if he's able to get 3, the story alone there with Adiwang coming back could be interesting. He's spoken a lot about wanting to do stuff outside of his division, going up a weight class. He's, of course, challenged Mikey Musumeci for the Flyweight Submission Grappling World Championship earlier this year, but I think a title defense will be next, and I think Pasio makes the most sense when you look at it. Strawweight Muay Thai, Joseph Laziri, a controversial title reign, of course. He's got the unification fight coming up with Prajanchai at One Friday Fights 46, which is a huge fight, and will either go on to, I think, really give him the legitimacy and credit that he is looking for, or we will have Prajanchai as the new champion. So exciting stuff there, and we will see how that plays out going into the new year. And finally, strawweight kickboxing, you've got Jonathan DeBella, who, of course, has only fought once in one championship this year, where he defended his title against Daniel Williams. I think the obvious thing they were going to push for was to have him rematch Zhang Peimian, who he, of course, won the belt against in that vacant title fight. But then Zhang had that strange fight with Rui Botelho, where Botelho pulled off the upset. Chatri Sityodtong said he wants to do that fight again, so I don't really know what's next for DeBella. I think if Zhang beats Botelho, they will do the Zhang rematch, and of course, I want to see that fight because their first fight was incredible. But outside of that, I don't think they're not going to have Botelho go straight in against DeBella, I don't think, because they want the Zhang fight. Everyone wants the Zhang fight, so we'll see what happens with that, but I think we might end up with a scenario where we don't see DeBella too much again. And that's disappointing because I've been so impressed by him in both of his fights in one championship. And that'll do it for strawweight. Moving up to the flyweight division, where we have got some of the biggest names on the roster, starting with the flyweight MMA world champion, one of the greatest of all time, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. The big question here is, will he come back? We still don't know. He beat Adriano Moraes in their trilogy at One Fight Night 10 and kind of said that he might be retiring, but didn't give a concrete answer. He is, of course... since that, he has been competing in professional grappling tournaments. And so I think the obvious thing for DJ is if you're going to have him back, it needs to be something special. It needs to be something where he really is motivated for the challenge, right? They were kind of lining up Kairat Akhmatov for the title shot, which he has an impressive win streak, but then he was suspended. So that's kind of gone out the window. I think there's 3 options, I think, for DJ. If you're going to have him back, you either have him do another mixed rules fight like he did with Rodtang, maybe a rematch with Rodtang, maybe somebody else, like a Superlek or somebody like that. You either have him go up a weight class to challenge for the Bantamweight title. Demetrius, for all of his incredible accolades, has never become a two-weight world champion, so I'd be very, very excited to see him go up, especially if it's him versus Andrade. That would be fantastic. But I think the most likely one is probably him versus Mikey Musumeci for the Flyweight Submission Grappling World Championship, which again, I'd be very excited to see. So what do I want from DJ? I would love to see him compete once again, but of course I think it needs to be something that makes sense for him at this stage in his career. So we shall wait and see what happens with Mighty Mouse. Moving on to the man that I just mentioned, Mikey Musumeci, Darth Rigatoni himself. Similar note across the board for the Submission Grappling World Champions. I just want to see him fight high-level guys on a consistent basis if possible. He's had an incredible run this year. 3 title defenses and a submission win over Shinya Aoki. I know that he's kind of spoken already about not being in any rush to come back, and he's got a few opponents that he's looking at, some decent level opponents as well. So I would be happy with Musumeci not being as active if it means we get higher level contests, like higher level opponents. So we'll see. But Mikey Musumeci is so goddamn good that it's hard to really make a lot of his contests that interesting. Like I give a lot of credit to some of the people that he's gone up against, but you're just looking at it like they ain't taking that belt. So give me some jeopardy in some of these contests. That's all I'm asking for. Flyweight kickboxing. One of the fighters of the year, no doubt, the kicking machine, Superlek. To me, personally, with Superlek, you've got 2 options, I think. I don't think his days at flyweight are going to last much longer. So I think if you're going to keep him at flyweight, it needs to be Rodtang rematch or Takeru. If it's neither of those, I don't want to see him at flyweight, because as much as his fight with Rodtang was absolutely fantastic, him missing weight meant that it was a 3-round non-title affair instead of 5 rounds for the Muay Thai belt, right? It just can't keep happening. I just think it needs to go. He needs to go up to bantamweight. I'd be excited to see him go up to bantamweight, maybe take on one of those top contenders, or Haggerty, I don't know. We'll get to Haggerty in a minute, but I don't know whether Superlek and Haggerty is a great fight, so I wouldn't be mad at it. Don't know if it's the right move for either of them next, but I think that, like I said, it needs to be Rodtang 2, Takeru, or bantamweight. Simple as. Moving on to one of the people that I just mentioned there, the Iron Man, Rodtang Jitmanon. I'm sure that he will defend his Muay Thai title a couple of times next year. But for me, we finally got the fight that we had been wanting to see for such a long time. Rodtang versus Superlek earlier this year. My one wish for Rodtang is that we get to see him in another really big fight, because it felt like for a while we would just kind of see him going through the motions against these challengers that everyone knew he was going to beat. So next year, as long as we get him versus Superlek 2, or we get him fighting Takeru, I am happy. That's all I want to see from Rodtang. I'm sure he will fight a couple of times throughout the year, but as long as we get one of those big fights, I'll be happy with that. And yeah, the Iron Man rounds out the flyweight division. At bantamweight, we have got just 2 world champions to talk about, and they of course recently fought each other in the main event of One Fight Night 16. So very, very current stuff that we are talking about here. We'll start with the MMA world champion Fabricio Wonderboy Andrade, who of course came up short in the main event of One Fight Night 16, but he is still the MMA world champion. He cleared out a lot of the contenders, and we're in a little bit of a, if you compare it to the UFC's featherweight division, where if Volkanovski isn't beating them, Max Holloway sure is. You've got a little bit of that with Andrade and John Lineker, in that if they don't manage to get to Andrade quick enough, John Lineker beats him first, as he did with Stephen Lohman, who was the clear option to challenge Andrade, I think even before he fought Lineker. So personally, I'm not in a rush to see Andrade fight Lineker again just yet. If Lineker beats everybody, another win, maybe another 2, it's undeniable you have to do the trilogy fight, but the first 2 fights weren't that competitive. I don't really need to see it again right now. You have got Kwon Il there, who has had back-to-back finishes since losing to Andrade. That probably makes the most sense. I wouldn't be mad at seeing Andrade go back into striking, maybe not against a Haggerty like he did last time, but, compete in Muay Thai or kickboxing against someone a little bit lower down if there isn't a contender at bantamweight for him. I would like to see him stay active by competing in striking or something like that, but I would also completely understand if he just takes some time off for the first, kind of half of the year and gets back in there later on. I know that. Well, we should talk about Jonathan Haggerty now, actually. The 2-sport world champion, Muay Thai and kickboxing champion at bantamweight. He's spoken about wanting to fight Andrade in MMA. Personally, I don't think this is the move just yet. I think you can build to that towards the end of next year, but I would like to see Haggerty defend those belts first, because you've got so many options for him right now. You, of course, have the man he won the Bantamweight Muay Thai title off, Nongo, is making his comeback against Nico Carrillo at One Friday Fights 46, so that's an option. You've got Felipe Lobo, who of course he had that encounter with after beating Andrade, and you of course have the potential of Superlek or Rodtang moving up to the bantamweight division. So you have plenty of options there, and as much as I understand that both Haggerty and One Championship might want to capitalise on the fact that he could hold 3 world titles in 3 different sports at the same time, right? If he goes and fights Andrade next, I think that fight is just as exciting if he doesn't hold those striking titles, and so I would rather see him defend those belts, and hey, you know, if he fights a Superlek or a Nongo rematch, something like that, and wins, and he does it impressively, then have him go fight Andrade, that's cool, but I would like to see a title defence next for the main man, Jonathan Haggerty, if we're being honest. On to Featherweight, where we have got 2 of the best strikers in the world, and a world champion that still has quite a bit to prove, but I don't mean that in a bad way. I think we have a lot more to see from Tang Kai, and I'm excited to see it. Don't really need to say anything here. He is, of course, going to be fighting Tan Lee in a rematch, because Tan Lee was meant to fight him anyway, and then Tang Kai pulled out. Tan Lee won the interim title against Ilya Freemanov, so I'm excited to see that fight, and I don't know which way that's going to go, honestly. So excited to see that sometime early next year. Featherweight Muay Thai, you've got Tawanchai, one of the most exciting fighters to watch in the promotion, and he has got one of the best fights of the year coming up at One Friday Fights 46, where he will defend his title against Superbon. We've seen that fight be rebooked like 3 times now, so I just fingers crossed it happens, and yeah. So stoked to see that one. Featherweight kickboxing, Chingiz Alazov, another one in contention for fighter of the year. I think his 2 performances against Superbon and Murat Grigorian were fantastic. I don't really know what's next for Alazov. The only thing I have written down as a potential thing, I don't think it will be next, but it could be towards the end of next year, is him moving up a weight class to fight Regin Ursel, because I don't really see anyone right now that makes a whole lot of sense for Alazov. And we can have the same conversation about Regin Ursel. In fact, we'll have that same conversation about Regin Ursel right now. The man has beaten everybody. He holds, of course, the lightweight kickboxing and the lightweight Muay Thai world titles, and it just looks phenomenal. The only potential contender that you could pick out, I think, that would have been interesting was Liam Nolan. But, of course, his fight with Since McClinby was cancelled. He had to pull out. Clinby stayed on the card, obviously, but Nolan did not, so I don't know what's next for Regin Ursel. I think a champion versus champion matchup should be something that he's looking to do around this point. And of course, above him, there is no welterweight, middleweight striking champion. There is only Roman Kriklier at light heavyweight, who again I have nothing for, because it feels like we haven't seen him in forever, so I don't know what I'm supposed to predict for him, but I will just leave that where it is. But yeah, champion versus champion, Alazov versus ESL would be absolutely fantastic. That would be one of the best fights of the year if they are able to put that together. So fingers crossed for that. Also in the lightweight division, we've got Christian Lee, who of course also holds the welterweight MMA World Championship. We haven't seen him in 2023, of course, following the passing of his younger sister, Victoria. We had Angela Lee take the majority of the year off, and then just when I thought she was going to come back, she retired. It doesn't look like Christian Lee's going to do that. He did start training again about halfway through the year, I think. So I think we will see Christian Lee back. I don't know when. To me, if he is going to come back, the most logical contender would be Halil Amir at lightweight. Amir has produced 3 consecutive wins now and looked very, very good. I think that would be a really, really tough fight to call, actually. I really, really, really rate Amir. So, and of course, really, really rate Christian Lee. So we will see. I just hope to see him back first half of next year. I think that it's understandable that he hasn't. I'm not going to be like activity, because it's completely understandable why he hasn't fought this year. The only other thing I can think of is I always forget. I get confused, right, where Sebastian Kadastan fights, because he fought Soldic, but Soldic fights at multiple weight classes. So I can't remember what weight class that fight was. There's a few guys like that in One Championship where it's like, they could probably fight in multiple weight classes. Sexan is another one where he's like in between, and he's definitely deserving of being in a big fight next, but it's like, where do you put him? So I don't know, but Halil Amir versus Christian Lee would be an absolute banger for Lee to come back to, so pull in for that one. We of course have one more lightweight champion to talk about. We've got Kay Rotolo, the lightweight submission grappling world champion. We'll talk about him, and of course his brother Ty Rotolo, the welterweight submission grappling world champion, at the same time, because I don't think there's anything jumping out at me here, to be honest. I just want to see, like I said, high-level matchups. The one thing that I would note down for either of these guys is potentially a match with Gary Tonon. I know, of course, Ty has already faced and beaten Gary Tonon, but because you have Tan Kai versus Tan Lee already booked in for a rematch, Tonon doesn't really have anything left to do, even though he is the next contender for that belt. If he doesn't want to sit around and wait, because I think if he sits around and waits, he will get the title shot, or maybe fights Martin Nguyen, potentially, but I think he, will be fine just waiting to see who wins that fight and then fighting either of them. So I would like to see Gary Tonon back in grappling at some point in one, but Kay and Ty Rotolo, keep doing what you're doing, but hopefully against better opposition, personally. Our final two world champions in MMA, it's very difficult to predict what will be next for these guys, because Renier de Ridder, the middleweight champion, we haven't seen this year in MMA. We of course did see him compete against Ty Rotolo in a grappling contest, but he hasn't returned to MMA since losing his light heavyweight title to the man that we will talk about next. I don't want to see him go back in for the light heavyweight title just yet. I would rather see him defend the middleweight title first and then go up. I know that that's difficult because he's alternating weight classes, which is not ideal, but he's been gone for a year. I think the middleweight title defense is due. The problem is there isn't really a contender that stands out, maybe apart from Ong La, and he already beat Ong La twice, so it's a tough one. I would like to see him defend the middleweight title, but who knows? And of course we could see him face the final champion to talk about on this list. I'm of course talking about the heavyweight and light heavyweight world champion, Anatoly Malakin. The heavyweight division really needs some new blood right now, because Malakin is cleaning everybody out to the point where I think the fight that will be next will be him and Amir Ali Akbari, and of course he already kind of smoked Ali Akbari, so it's like... But there's tension between those guys. Ali Akbari's beaten a lot of the other contenders in the division, so it makes sense. I just... it's hard to get excited about that, but there will be a bit of tension, a bit of bad blood between those guys that should build the fight a little bit more. So I think that makes sense. I think that you have him defend the heavyweight title, you have RDR defend the middleweight title, and then you have them both come together at the end of the year for a light heavyweight title fight rematch. That makes the most sense to me. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about these. Which fights are you most looking forward to potentially seeing next year in one championship? All that good stuff, and yeah, drop the video a like, all that stuff that you already know about, I'm sure, and enjoy the upcoming fights, because we've got some incredible matchups I will definitely be doing some preview videos on in the coming weeks, so see you then.